All right, Buffalo Bills fans, welcome to this episode of The Walkthrough. I'm your host, Anthony Marino. Happy to be here with you once again, talking everything Buffalo Bills, and proud to be part of the Overreaction Sports Network. Super Bowl weekend is here, and I don't know for all of you, like me, just feeling a bit disenchanted this week when it comes to, arguably the biggest game of the year. I'm just not feeling it so much. And I'm guessing that many of you are probably in that same boat. For me, of course, I will be watching the Super Bowl on Sunday evening. Imagining all of you will probably do the same thing, right? Whether you hate the matchup or the fact that the New England Patriots are playing or whatever that may look like, you watch the Super Bowl every year. And maybe you are, maybe you're not, right? You can jump in the comment section here for those of you that are watching live and let me know if you are going to watch or if it's something that you're going to take a pass on this year. But for myself, I'm going to watch the Super Bowl. I do every year, regardless of the matchup, and will be interesting to see what happens. We are brought to you here at FanDuel at the Overreaction Sports Network by our friends at FanDuel. And right now, the Seattle Seahawks are a 4.5-point favorite. The over-under got it 45.5, which seems kind of low to me. Right, the 4.5 I can understand based on the matchup, the coaches, everything that kind of goes into this, where the two teams have been this season. That part I'm certainly fine with, but the 45.5 to me seems a little bit low. But again, remains to be seen. I don't spend as close much time looking at the betting odds and kind of evaluating that, but I thought that would have been up closer to 50. But Dan Freddy here at the Overreaction Sports Network, right? The host of the Mafia Bets show. He is the one that has all this information and kind of can share that wisdom. So, when you get a chance, make sure you hit that subscribe button, whether you're watching here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So you get the Mafia Bets show, but you also get the walkthrough each and every week. You hear from Joe Miller, John Fina, Jerry Ostrowski, Zig Fracassi. We've got you covered, and we appreciate everybody being part of what we do here. So, listen, like I said, the Super Bowl, okay, let's just get it over with so we can get to the combine, so we can get to free agency, so we can really start looking towards next season for the Buffalo Bills. On today's show, I want to spend a little bit of time with you talking about the Bills' unrestricted free agents. I think as we start to get to this time of the year, draft chatter is going to pick up soon, right, with the combine just a couple of weeks away. But free agency is really that first thing that hits, right? You want to talk about the draft and what the Bills can do. Well, take a look and see what happens during that, initial two stages of free agency, and that'll give you a better idea of what the team can be looking for or what holes they have that maybe they need to address throughout the draft. We'll get to some draft talk later on. I've kind of got my thoughts on, I guess if I was Brandon Beane, what my philosophy would be. And when I say my philosophy, right, not around certain players or positions, but more along the lines of is this your year that you're looking to trade up? Is it a year that you're looking to trade down? We'll kind of talk about those things in future episodes. So, again, for those of you that tune in each and every week, thank you so much for all of that. But listen, I want to talk about these unrestricted free agents. I'll share some of my thoughts, but again, right, you start to go through this, it's going to be hard to tell with some of these players because you've got, in essence, a new coaching staff, new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, especially on the defensive side, right? There's going to be a lot of question marks there. And then a new special teams coordinator. So some of these guys that we would probably pencil in as Sean McDermott favorites, that's not something that's going to happen moving forward under Joe Brady's coaching staff. Yeah, there's some guys that have come back, and that part I completely get and understand. But really, for the most part here, there's a lot of question marks that will come and what it's going to look like under Jim Leonard's defense. So before we get into that, let me just do a quick shout out to everybody at Anchor Bar to thank them for the support of everything that we do here at the Overreaction Sports Network. Of course, the Anchor Bar, it's home of the original Buffalo Chicken Wing, and it's the place to watch all your favorite sporting events. Now that the NFL season is coming to an end, the Winter Olympics are taking place, plenty of NBA and college basketball, and of course, the Sabres will be back after the Olympic break. So you can go to anchorbar.com to get all the information on locations, online ordering, menus, anything you could possibly want, you can go to anchorbar.com. So, in addition to the famous buffalo chicken wings, I mean, listen, that's probably the thing that you're going to Anchor Bar to get, but maybe you're feeling like something else. They've got appetizers, chicken tenders, pizza, beef on weck, salads, so much more that you can choose from. And again, go to anchorbar.com for all that information, especially on their 16 locations and their 3 new spots in Tucson, Arizona, Frisco, Texas, and Raleigh, North Carolina. And the weekly reminder to our friends at Anchor Bar, let's get one here in Albany, New York, as soon as we possibly can. So, all right, let's get into things when it comes to free agents. And the information I have here, if you're watching on the YouTube side, you see me looking off to the side. I've got Spot Track open here, which is usually my go-to to look at, Bills contract information, everything that they've got there. And for some players, they're sharing their market value as well. So I will run through these and then kind of have some commentary. And again, like if there's something that you disagree with, someone you think the team should bring back or should definitely not bring back, make sure you include that in the comment section here. So first up on the list is Joey Bosa. He signed the 1-year contract with the Bills, going to be turning 31 years old. And it was interesting with Bosa this past season. Kind of a great start, right? Forcing a bunch of fumbles, generating some sacks. Then over the second half of the season and into the playoffs, was just not the player that you had seen in the first half of the year. And there was always the question of, well, how much will the Bills play him kind of when it comes to his snap percentages? Because, right, you can take a look at this and think this is a guy you want to be healthy, that he can preserve himself for the stretch run and the playoffs. And that just really didn't happen, right? And along those lines, kind of knew that was the case. Bosa probably had to even play a bit more than expected based on some other injuries along the defensive line. But, as you look at this, he will likely hit free agency. There's kind of been some rumblings with just, kind of some, I'll call them like rumors, like almost like with him saying thank you and not saying goodbye to Buffalo, but a thank you post that kind of read like a goodbye to me. So Spot Track has his market value of $13.7 million. If he was someone to sign with another team in free agency, which I would certainly expect based on his pedigree and name and maybe being more of a situational pass rusher and less of playing on early downs like he did for the Bills this season. He's probably going to get a $10+ million contract on the open market and would factor in nicely into any sort of comp pick structure for the Bills. Next on the list is Daquan Jones. And Daquan has just turned 34. He's played 12 years in the NFL, played admirably for the Bills. And when I look at the market value for Spot Track, I mean, they've got him at like $1.8 million this year. I don't know that he would be re-signing in Buffalo for that number. And I know, some fans kind of blame him for different pieces. But when you're talking about the defensive line, and if the Bills are shifting to a 3-4, having someone that, kind of brings his level of experience to what might be a relatively young group, right? When you talk about guys like Deion Walker and TJ Sanders and just what that room is going to look like, I wouldn't write that one off. I mean, again, at 34 years old, how much longer is he going to want to keep playing? Is he going to want to keep playing on, something in the neighborhood of a $2 million contract? Remains to be seen. But I'm kind of leaving the door open on that one just a little bit. Another, probably the biggest one for the Bills when you talk about the unrestricted free agents is center Connor McGovern. Right, he's finishing up his 3-year contract in Buffalo. It was a relatively modest deal that took place with him. I guess there was some, conversation around an extension. He was doing some interviews earlier in the year, and he kind of made it sound like things were tabled for right now. Made it sound like he took a discount to come to Buffalo in the first place. And now you've got a situation, right, that centerpiece for the offensive line that has shown so much stability over the past few years. Now kind of some question of what's going to happen at center. And there could be some talk about Alec Anderson staying with the club, Cedric Van Pran-Granger. But, for what the Bills have done at center with Mitch Morris and now with Connor McGovern, it's kind of been that valued leadership. And I'm not saying that Anderson or Van Pran-Granger can't, emerge as that type of player. But I don't know if, kind of that lack of of experience playing over these past couple of years is something that would work for the Bills. So Spotrac has right now, I mean, his market valued at about $16 million per year. Joe Marino was talking on Locked On Bills the other day and feels like it would be a minimum of $14 million contract for Connor McGovern. Now, when it comes time to playing with the salary cap and different things, the Bills can do, a couple of easy things to create some cap space. So, when you say that number, it's not as daunting as it may seem. Connor McGovern, in addition to just his play on the field and how kind of the high level that he has played at, he's kind of a centerpiece in the locker room too, right? You've seen on Hard Knocks, you've heard the stories before. He and his wife are always hosting the team. They're coming over for pizza nights, spending time together. So that's one that I'm just guessing that the Bills will find a way to get creative and bring Connor McGovern back next year. But again, remains to be seen. Next one on the list, and it was a head scratcher from the beginning. It continued to be a head scratcher throughout the entire season, and there's no way that I see Larry Ogunjobi coming back to Buffalo this year. I mean, Wright had a $6.5 million one-year contract where he was suspended for the first 6 games. It was kind of an odd fit for the Bills defense. Felt a little bit more like a desperation signing when the Bills maybe missed out on some of the other defensive tackles in free agency. He's going to turn 32. I didn't realize he was that old when the Bills even made that signing. So, listen, unfortunately, nothing against him as a person, a teammate, any of those things, but it was a head scratcher from the beginning, and don't see Larry Ogunjobi coming back to Buffalo next season. Next up is Matt Milano. And with Milano, it was interesting, right? Because they reworked his contract to make him a free agent after this season. He certainly battled through some injuries, showed flashes of, the Matt Milano of old, right? Like the ability to make plays, kind of being an impactful linebacker for the Buffalo Bills. But now that he's on the wrong side of 30, again, has battled some injuries throughout his career. He finds himself as a free agent. The market value from Spotrac is right around $4.5 million. And I'll be curious for Milano, like, is he that type of player that, like, listen, I'm motivated to come back to Buffalo, maybe to play, inside linebacker as part of that 3-4 defense. And, this is where he wants to end his career. Or for him, it's like, listen, he's looking for a change, right? New coaches coming in. Maybe he's looking to do something a little bit different. And maybe it's, unfortunately, Matt Milano's time coming to an end with the Bills. Certainly the 9 years that he's played in Buffalo has been a centerpiece of the defense. Again, battled through some of those injuries, but played at an incredible level. I'd love to see if there's a way for him to come back to Buffalo, just that sentimental side of me. But, the more practical side says, yeah, for the money that he might command, his time in Buffalo might be done, especially with the switch on defense. But Matt Milano, one to definitely keep an eye on. AJ Epinesa, again, right, a former second-round pick for the Bills, signed a contract extension a couple years ago, around $6 million per year. Spotrac has his value somewhere in that same neighborhood, right, just under $6.5 million. And with Epinesa, we've seen those flashes, right? You've seen games where he's making some splash plays, knocking down passes at the line, something that he certainly thrives at. But, what the Bills are going to do with the transition to this 3-4 type of hybrid, where he would fit in, would he be an outside linebacker type that, could stand up and, and fit into what Jim Leonhard is looking to do? That is going to be an interesting piece. And it's like, I'm a broken record with all of these players. What Jim Leonhard is looking for versus what, Sean McDermott was looking for, certainly remains to be seen. So we'll be curious there. And Epinesa is one I've got my eye on because, again, when you talk about defensive end and you lose Joey Bosa, and assuming you lose Joey Bosa and AJ Epinesa being a free agent, we'll be curious to see what the team is doing at that position. Next on the list, Tre'Davious White, 31 years old, 9 seasons in the NFL. His Spotrac projection is basically like a vet minimum type of contract, $1.2 million. In my opinion, if you can bring Trey White back at $1.2 million, that is something that you can do. When you talk about depth at cornerback, he certainly played well enough after Maxwell Harrison went down with his injury Yeah, some ups and downs, but that's going to come at the cornerback position. For him to have a bit of a career resurgence this past year, you can't look past that piece. Again, right? Like, he came back to play under Sean McDermott and part of the previous regime. How much Joe Brady values that veteran leadership and kind of looking at him as a piece that can continue with the team, I think remains to be seen. But yeah, if Tre'Davious White is going to get something south of $2 million per year, I'd like to see him back in Buffalo, even as like that fourth cornerback, right? Like, maybe give you a little bit of something on special teams, start to make that adjustment. But for me, that's one to keep an eye on. David Edwards, the starting left guard for the Bills. And again, right, you look at his career progression, even just in Buffalo, from being that sixth offensive lineman to transitioning to a starter to playing, consistently well over these past 2 years. This is one where with Spot Track, I'm kind of scratching my head a little bit because they have his market value of just under $20 million. And I understand that, listen, when it comes to guard positions, that they are starting to get paid, right? These used to be guys that, some of the top guards are making like $5-6 million a year. You're not drafting a guard in the first round, any of these pieces. That is transition when it comes to protecting your franchise quarterbacks. And certainly Edwards has done a great job in doing that for the Bills. But you're not bringing him back at a $20 million contract. That is not happening, in my opinion, for a left guard when, you can maybe look at someone like Alec Anderson to stay as a restricted free agent that can fill that spot. Maybe there's someone that you can get in the draft on day 2 that can come in and be a little bit of a plug and play starter. But, with the limited resources the Bills will have this year, I feel like it's going to be one or the other when it comes to Edwards or McGovern. I'm going to guess that it's going to be McGovern, especially based on these prices, but certainly something to keep an eye on. Next one up, Mitchell Trubisky, right, 31 years old. Backup quarterback for the Bills. I think it's going to be interesting for him, right? His Spot Track market value is just under $4.5 million. The Bills are certainly not bringing him back at that number. Now, Trubisky might look at things and say to himself, like, listen, I like it here in Buffalo. I like playing under Joe Brady, being the backup to Josh Allen, kind of for, who he is and what we've been able to do. Like, I certainly get that part. I'm pulling up his career earnings right now. Like, has earned over $51 million in his career. So money might not be the largest motivating factor for where he is in his career right now and for what he's looking to do. He's got that close relationship with Allen, what his relationship is like with Joe Brady, but maybe to have some of that consistency, we will certainly see. And Trubisky played, I thought relatively well in Week 18 against the Jets. I realize it's Week 18 and for everything that is, but showed that he can be a competent backup. And let's see what happens there. Others on the list that I won't spend a ton of time on, Damar Hamlin at safety. If he does come back, you're probably looking at a 1-year vet minimum type of contract. Again, for Jim Leonard to have been a NFL safety for 10 years, what he will be looking for in the position. Not sure if Hamlin kind of fits that bill or if his story has come to an end here in Buffalo. Reggie Gilliam, I certainly expect to be back as part of the running game, special teams. He's going to fit in any system that is out there. And for, what James Cook has done these past couple of seasons with the assistance from Reggie Gilliam, would expect him to be back. Cam Lewis is another one that I would hope that the Buffalo Bills bring back. His Spot Track projection is just around $1.5 million. He is someone that, right, like I thought played well in the game against the Broncos. I mean, certainly when he came out of the game for a couple of plays due to injury, the Broncos attacked that spot, and I thought he filled in admirably in his time. So, not even 27 years old yet. Again, you're going to get somewhere in a like $1.5 to $2 million contract, a bit of a Swiss Army piece that you can use on the offense. I would love to see Cam Lewis back with the Bills. Next up, Jordan Poyer, right? Jordan Poyer, 34 and a half years old, 13 seasons in the NFL. What an incredible job he did filling in for the Buffalo Bills when he was inserted into the starting lineup after Taylor Rapp's injury and really adding a level of stability, some high-quality play for someone that many had just figured like his career was over. I don't know for Poyer if he's looking to continue playing. He kind of made it sound like the door was still open there. And for the Bills, is it going to be a similar type of situation as last year? You've got a veteran here. Maybe he, doesn't do as much of the off-season stuff, doesn't have to participate in training camp, and signs with the practice squad in a similar way that he did this past season. And, then he can kind of start his ramp up, kind of a break glass in case of emergency, veteran presence, in the locker room during practice. But for Jordan Poyer, regardless of his age, it was great to see him back with the Bills and, yes, playing at a high level there. A guy there's going to be a lot of conversation around, Brandon Cooks, right after his release from the New Orleans Saints, signing with the Bills. Cooks makes it sound like he wants to be back in Buffalo next year. There's going to be so much conversation around the wide receiver position. That is going to be interesting. There is no projection here from Spot Track at this time, so I can't even guess what a contract would look like for Brandon Cooks. Certainly had some very high highs, and his lows were tough, right? But showed that he can add a kind of a vertical threat for the Buffalo Bills, and we'll be curious to see what happens with him and all the wide receivers this season. Kicker Matt Prater, good gosh, like the impact that he had on the team this year from the time that he joined, leading into week one with the game-winning kick against the Baltimore Ravens, and really just a stable presence for the Buffalo Bills throughout the entire season. What they're going to do at kicker, they can probably save about $4 million if they want to move on from Tyler Bass. Like, is that something that could happen? I don't know. Brandon Beane's comments last week made it sound like Bass would definitely be in training camp. But again, anything can change throughout free agency, throughout the draft, when the team has to do things to free up to not only get under the cap, but to give themselves some flexibility to be active throughout free agency. So, does Prater come back and, at 41 years old to compete for the starting job? Maybe do they draft a rookie or bring in an undrafted free agent to be a part of it? But, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if Matt Prater was there in training camp and, looking to be back with the Bills this season, or, for what he's shown. Who knows? Some other team, like he might hit the free agent market and somebody might look to scoop him up because he was incredibly consistent this past year. And, for Matt Prater, honestly, thank God the Bills were able to sign him and bring him in, and he played as well as he did. Some others on the list. Shaq Thompson, certainly a favorite of Bills fans this year, 32 years old, or going to be turning 32 in a few months. When you look at someone like Shaq, he's played in a 3-4. He's played in a 4-3. Does he provide a level of veteran leadership that the team certainly would need? If Matt Milano is gone, Terrell Bernard, will be back with the Bills this season, but how does he fit into that defense? Shaq Thompson, certainly brings a level of leadership and a high level of play for the team this past season. So curious to see what happens there. The rest of these guys, I'll kind of just, rip through a little bit. Jordan Phillips, if he's going to come back, probably on the practice squad. 35 years old. He said last year he would only play in Buffalo, so we'll see what happens there. Sam Franklin, special teams ace, right? 30 years old, would be coming in on some sort of a vet minimum type of contract. Punter Mitch Wishnowsky, I do that every time. He is a free agent. Do the Bills look to bring him back, or maybe get a rookie into camp to see what they can do there? Gabriel Davis, of course, battling through the season-ending injury. He would start the season on the PUP. I could definitely see him re-signing with the Bills on a vet minimum type of contract, maybe for 1 year, just as he's rehabbing, getting himself back healthy. So that is one that remains to be seen. And then you've got safety Darnell Savage that was signed with the Bills late in the season after things fell through with Darius Slay. Again, if he were to join the team, you're looking at a veteran minimum type of contract. So, as I said, if you've got some thoughts on these free agents, and I realize that's running through a bunch here, let me know your thoughts, right? I think when we go through some of these, like there's some conversations to have, right? I'm assuming Joey Bosa is gone. Larry Ogunjobi definitely gone. after that, like there's a little bit more, some question marks out there, when it comes to some of these players. And now with a new head coach, all new coordinators, what that will look like for the Bills will certainly be interesting to see. And we will have it covered for you each and every week here on the Walkthrough and on the Overreaction Sports Network. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you so much for being here each and every week. I'm going to get out of here for now. Go Bills, and we'll talk to you all again real soon.